Hello there. I'm the IdeaSpectrum, and this is your weekly dose of complicated, seemingly nonsense concepts made easier. Today, we're diving into a topic that gets thrown around a lot, debated passionately, and often misunderstood: feminism. But don't worry, we're not here to start a Twitter war, we're here to learn. Specifically, we're going to explore two major but moderate branches of feminism that have made a huge impact on the world: liberal feminism and social feminism. They both want to empower women, but they have very different ways of getting there. As always, we're not here to tell you what to believe. You are able to do that for yourself. We just want to make the ideas clear. Today, let's meet two forms of feminism that aren't shouting slogans or throwing bricks but are quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, transforming society, one reform at a time, the other system by system. Let's begin with a quick check-in. What is feminism? At its core, feminism is the belief in social, political, and economic equality between the sexes. That's it. Everything else, movements, protests, policy debates, branches out from this central idea. But feminism isn't a monolith. It's more like a river with many branches, flowing through history in waves, each with distinct goals and strategies. First wave, late 19th, early 20th century, focused on legal rights like property ownership and women's suffrage. Liberal feminism was its engine. Second wave, in the 1960s, 1980s, tackled broader issues: workplace discrimination, sexuality, family roles, and reproductive rights. Social feminism began gaining ground here, pushing for systemic reforms. Third wave, in the 1990s to early 2010s, highlighted intersectionality, the idea that race, class, sexuality, and gender all intersect to shape a woman's experience. Feminism diversified globally and culturally. Fourth wave, from 2010s to today, characterized by digital activism, pound metu, body positivity, and a renewed focus on inclusivity and justice across identities. Each wave built on the previous one, expanding the meaning and goals of feminism. Some feminists fight for legal reforms, others for social revolution. Some focus on workplace rights, others on cultural representation or health equity. And yet, despite all the progress, gender inequality is far from over, even in the most developed countries. In the United States, women still earn only about 82 cents for every dollar earned by men, according to the U.S. Census Bureau, 2022. In Europe, the gender pay gap hovers around 13% across EU countries, Eurostat, 2023. Leadership disparities remain stark. Only about 10% of Fortune 500 CEOs are women. Issues like workplace harassment, unequal caregiving expectations, and underrepresentation in STEM persist. These statistics highlight that feminism still has critical work ahead. The two forms we're diving into today, liberal feminism and social feminism, are often seen as more moderate, in that they work largely within existing systems. But don't be fooled. These movements have changed the world in real, lasting ways. Liberal feminism is rooted in Enlightenment values like individual liberty, rationality, and equal rights. It emerged in the 18th and 19th centuries, gaining momentum with thinkers like Mary Wollstonecraft, who wrote A Vindication of the Rights of Woman in 1792. She argued that women weren't inferior by nature, they were simply denied education and opportunity. The idea: if women were given the same rights and freedoms as men, education, the vote, equal pay, they'd flourish just as well. And modern research supports this. Studies such as those by the World Bank and the OECD have shown that increasing women's access to education and economic participation significantly boosts GDP and innovation. For example, a McKinsey Global Institute report, 2015, estimated that $12 trillion could be added to global GDP by 2025 by advancing gender equality. Research published in journals like Science and Nature also affirms that, when given equal resources and opportunities, women perform at comparable levels to men in areas like STEM, leadership, and entrepreneurship. Liberal feminists believe the system isn't inherently broken, it's just unfairly designed. So their strategy is reform: change the laws, open the doors, level the playing field. This was the ideology behind the first wave of feminism, which focused on legal inequalities like property rights, education, and, perhaps most famously, the right to vote. And while much has been achieved, many believe this movement still holds significant untapped potential. By continuing to push for legal and institutional reforms, such as better parental leave policies, closing gender pay gaps, and improving political representation, liberal feminism may still help address persistent inequalities in modern societies. Liberal feminism has achieved great things, concrete, life-changing wins that have transformed the daily lives of millions of women around the world. Among these accomplishments are women's suffrage. Imagine being taxed, judged by laws, and expected to follow the rules, but not allowed to vote. That was reality until liberal feminists pushed back. In New Zealand, 1893, activists like Kate Shepherd successfully petitioned for women's suffrage. In the U.S., leaders like Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton led decades of marches, speeches, and civil disobedience, culminating in the 19th Amendment in 1920. The UK followed with partial suffrage in 1918, which meant that only women over 30 that met certain property requirements could vote, and full suffrage for all women who were over 21 in 1928. These weren't just political wins, they were existential ones. Voting was the gateway to civic dignity. Another liberal feminist win is educational access. Higher education was once reserved for men, liberal feminists said. Nope. Emily Davies fought tooth and nail to establish Girton College at Cambridge. In 1869, she faced in the beginning strong opposition from many quarters, including from male academics and university officials, who doubted women's intellectual capabilities. Meanwhile, in the U.S., women established institutions like the Seven Sisters Colleges, which is a group of prestigious liberal arts colleges. They were founded in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Today, women outnumber men in many university systems worldwide. According to the OECD's Education at a Glance 2023 report, women make up a slight majority of new entrants to tertiary education across OECD countries, at 55%. Notably, there is no longer a single OECD country where women are not in the majority among first-time entrants to tertiary education. Iceland has the largest gender gap, with women constituting 62% of first-time entrants compared to 38% for men. That's a liberal feminist legacy. Another fight liberal feminists fought and that you might have heard of: equal pay and employment rights. Same job, same pay wasn't always a given. The Equal Pay Act of 1963, U.S. was a game-changer. The act made it illegal for employers to pay men and women different wages for the same work, though there were some exceptions that allowed for wage differences based on seniority, merit, or quantity of work. It also laid the foundation for subsequent laws and regulations designed to close the gender wage gap further. Title VII of the Civil Rights Act, 1964, that prohibited discrimination in hiring based on race, color, religion, sex, or national origin. This was crucial because it provided a legal pathway not just for fighting unequal pay, but also gender-based hiring, firing, promotions, and harassment. It also empowered women to sue employers for discriminatory practices, and led to the creation of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission (EEOC), which investigates claims and enforces civil rights in the workplace. Over time, Title VII also became the foundation for landmark cases and policies addressing sexual harassment, gender stereotyping, and even protections for LGBTQ+ workers, as ruled by the U.S. Supreme Court in Bostock v. Clayton County, 2020. Across the EU, Article 157 mandates equal pay for equal work. These laws were hard-fought and still under challenge, but they exist because of liberal feminists. And while the wage gap has not been fully closed, thanks to these laws combined with other legislative and cultural shifts, the gender wage gap narrowed significantly, from women earning roughly 59 cents on the dollar in the 1960s to about 82 cents today. U.S. Census Bureau, 2022. Then, we have reproductive rights. Control over one's body equals control over one's destiny. Griswold v. Connecticut, 1965 legalized birth control for married couples. This landmark decision by the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that a state's ban on the use of contraceptives violated the right to marital privacy. It was the first time the court recognized a constitutional right to privacy. a concept that was later foundational in other pivotal decisions like Eisenstadt v. Baird, 1972, which extended birth control rights to unmarried couples, and Roe v. Wade, 1973, which addressed abortion rights. Griswold shifted the legal landscape around reproductive rights, influencing generations of legal arguments and protections. It also marked a significant milestone in women's autonomy over reproductive decisions, paving the way for greater economic and social agency for women, especially in their ability to plan families and careers. This shift in reproductive freedom indirectly contributed to the increase in women's participation in higher education and the workforce during the following decades. Roe v. Wade, 1973, granted constitutional abortion rights, marking a turning point in reproductive freedom in the United States. It established that a woman had a constitutional right to choose to have an abortion under the right to privacy protected by the 14th Amendment. This decision not only expanded women's bodily autonomy, but also had widespread societal implications, enabling more women to pursue higher education, careers, and financial independence by giving them control over family planning. Though Roe was overturned in 2022 by Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization, its legacy continues to shape debates around bodily autonomy and civil rights. Roe also laid the groundwork for later legal protections in areas of health privacy and anti-discrimination. In terms of more recent legislative progress in this area, a notable example is the Women's Health Protection Act, which has been introduced multiple times in the U.S. Congress. This proposed federal law seeks to codify the protections of Roe v. Wade into national legislation by preventing states from imposing medically unnecessary restrictions on abortion services. Although it has not yet been passed into law, its growing support highlights continued momentum in liberal feminist advocacy for reproductive rights. Similarly, some states like California and New York have enacted their own laws to enshrine the right to abortion in state constitutions or legal codes, effectively preserving access despite the federal rollback. Liberal feminists fought for access to contraception, family planning, and bodily autonomy, and in many parts of the world, they won. Liberal feminists have also combated sexual harassment. Sexual harassment used to be just how things were. Thinkers like Catherine MacKinnon defined it as a civil rights issue. Court cases and legal reform followed. A landmark example is Meritor Savings Bank v. Vinson, 1986, in which the U.S. Supreme Court recognized that a claim of hostile work environment sexual harassment could be brought under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This case laid the groundwork for future decisions by establishing that workplace harassment did not have to be economic in nature to be illegal. Another significant case was Harris v. Forklift Systems, Inc., 1993, where the court ruled that harassment need not cause psychological injury to be actionable. It only needed to be severe or pervasive enough to create a hostile or abusive work environment. These decisions broadened the interpretation of Title VII and provided workers, especially women, with stronger protections. Such jurisprudence helped build a legal culture where victims could more confidently seek justice. HR departments were compelled to implement preventive measures, and employers were held accountable for discriminatory or harassing behavior. This growing body of case law contributed directly to the modern understanding and enforcement of sexual harassment policies across industries. Today, workplaces have HR policies and training, not perfect, but progress. Now, what about liberal feminists today? They are represented by the National Organization for Women, NOW. Founded in 1966, the National Organization for Women is liberal feminism's institutional engine in the U.S. It lobbied for Title IX, ensuring gender equality in education, fought for the Equal Rights Amendment, still not ratified, but gaining traction again, championed abortion access, LGBTQ+ rights, and economic equality. Now organizes protests, sues corporations, supports candidates, and educates voters. Liberal feminism in action. Let's now pass to social feminism. Social feminism grew out of Marxist and socialist traditions, especially in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Its central idea, that capitalism and patriarchy are intertwined. It says you can't fix women's oppression just by changing laws. You have to change the economic and social systems that produce inequality. Key early thinkers included Clara Zetkin, Germany, a staunch Marxist and prominent member of the German Social Democratic Party, SPD. Zetkin believed that women's liberation could not be achieved without a complete transformation of the capitalist system. She was instrumental in organizing the first International Women's Day in 1911 and frequently wrote about how the working-class struggle and the fight for women's rights were inseparable. Zetkin criticized bourgeois feminism for ignoring the needs of working-class women and saw socialism as the only path to genuine gender equality. Alexandra Kollontai, Russia, a revolutionary and the first woman in history to hold a government position, People's Commissar for Social Welfare after the 1917 Russian Revolution, Kollontai was deeply committed to women's emancipation through socialism. She advocated for state-supported childcare, communal kitchens, and maternity leave so that women could fully participate in public life. Her writings emphasized sexual liberation and criticized the traditional family unit as a tool of both capitalist and patriarchal oppression. Kollontai was a key figure in establishing Zenotdel, the women's department of the Communist Party, which aimed to improve the status of Soviet women. Social feminists see unpaid domestic labor, poverty, health care, and housing as feminist issues, not just side notes. Now, among their significant contributions, we find their efforts for labor rights since they fought for safer factories, fair wages, and reasonable hours, especially for working-class women. Reformers like Florence Kelley exposed child labor and won legal protections. Kelley was instrumental in the passage of the Illinois Factory Act of 1893, which prohibited child labor and limited working hours for women. She also served as the first General Secretary of the National Consumers League, where she led campaigns to encourage ethical labor practices and created white label certifications for companies that met certain labor standards. Additionally, Kelley helped found the NAACP and advocated for federal labor legislation through her work with the U.S. Children's Bureau. Social feminists advocated for unionization, maternity leave, and worker protections. They organized rallies and lobbied legislators, contributing to key labor laws like the Fair Labor Standards Act 1938, which established minimum wage and maximum hour standards. Events such as the 1909 New York Shirtwaist Strike, or Uprising of the 20,000, in which thousands of garment workers, many of them immigrant women, demanded better working conditions, showcased the power and commitment of social feminists in labor reform. Social feminists also fought for childcare and family policies. Without affordable childcare, workplace equality is an illusion. Nordic countries embraced social feminist ideas: subsidized daycare, long parental leaves, state pensions. These nations took seriously the idea that gender equality requires structural, economic support, not just formal legal rights. Sweden and Norway provide heavily subsidized public childcare, with costs typically capped at around 3–5% of household income. In Finland, the government guarantees a place in public daycare for every child under school age. The focus is not just affordability, but also quality, small class sizes, trained educators, and developmental curricula. These policies make it possible for both parents to work, ensuring women aren't forced to stay home due to child care costs, a major difference from countries where private childcare is prohibitively expensive. On the parental leave part, Sweden offers 480 days of paid parental leave per child, which can be split between parents. 90 days are reserved for each parent. Use it or lose it, to encourage fathers to take leave and support shared caregiving. Norway meanwhile provides 49 weeks at 100% pay, or 59 weeks at 80% pay, and includes a 15-week quota specifically for each parent, reinforcing equal responsibility. And Iceland pioneered a 3+3+3 model, 3 months for each parent, and 3 months to share as they choose. The gender-neutral design has resulted in high paternal participation. These policies lifted women into the workforce without forcing them to choose between career and family. Another fight the social feminists fought is reproductive justice. Social feminism asks, can a woman really choose if she can't afford a doctor? Groups like SisterSong broadened the conversation to include race, income, disability, and geography. Founded in 1997, SisterSong was created by Black women and women of color who believed that mainstream reproductive rights organizations, mostly white-led, were too narrowly focused on issues like abortion access and contraceptives, while ignoring the lived experiences of marginalized communities. They coined and embraced the term reproductive justice, a framework that combines reproductive rights with social justice. It was first conceptualized in 1990 by a group of black women who met in Chicago in response to the inadequacies of the pro-choice movement in addressing systemic barriers. They have worked on centering race and structural racism, highlighting economic inequality, addressing disability and healthcare access, and the effect of geographic disparities. Through their Trust Black Women campaign, the advocacy around the Hyde Amendment, which prohibits federal funds, like Medicaid, from being used for abortion, disproportionately affecting low-income women, and litigation against Georgia's abortion ban, SisterSong did an amazing job at shifting the entire framework from asking, "Do you have access to abortion?" to, "Do you have the power and support to make choices about your body, family, and future?" A much broader and more equitable lens. If you want a video on the spectacular work that the SisterSong group has done, and its long-lasting effects, let me know in the comments. Social feminists have also successfully linked economic injustice to gender, housing insecurity, food deserts, and lack of health care. All feminist issues because they disproportionately affect women, especially women of color, single mothers, and working-class women. Women, globally and in most societies, are more likely to be poor than men. In the U.S., for example, 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women, and single mothers are significantly more likely to experience poverty than single fathers. Structural issues like wage gaps, childcare burdens, and unequal job opportunities all compound over time, making women more vulnerable to poverty. For example of how social feminists fought these issues, in New York, groups like Picture the Homeless and National Coalition for the Homeless have worked with feminist organizers to emphasize housing as both a human right and a gender equity issue. Many women, particularly in rural areas and urban communities of color, live in food deserts, where access to fresh, affordable food is limited. Groups like Black Women's Blueprint and Just Harvest have connected food insecurity to reproductive justice, showing that raising a child requires access to healthy food. Maternal mortality, lack of contraception access, and chronic health issues go unaddressed in many communities. The Democratic Socialists of America Feminist Working Group includes Medicare for All in its platform because healthcare affects bodily autonomy, economic independence, and child rearing, all feminist concerns. While we are talking about them, a modern example of a social feminist entity, Democratic Socialists of America, DSA, Feminist Working Group, and they support Medicare for All, as mentioned before, student debt cancellation through campaigns and rallies, legislative pressure as DSA works with progressive lawmakers, like Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Senator Bernie Sanders, to support bills that cancel federal student debt without means testing, and through education and organizing via teach-ins, webinars, and social media campaigns. DSA connects student debt to broader issues of economic injustice and gender inequality. They also support universal childcare by policy advocacy since DSA supports federal and state-level efforts to establish universal, publicly funded childcare systems. This includes pressure on legislators to support bills like the Child Care for Working Families Act, by community models through supporting or co-developing cooperative childcare collectives, and pushing municipalities to fund public early childhood education programs, and by coalition building. DSA does not address these problems as progressive goodies, but as feminist necessities. Though they have different lenses, one legal, one systemic, both liberal and social feminism prioritize women's empowerment. One says, "Let us in." The other says, "Let's rebuild it better." In today's world, liberal feminism is more mainstream, seen in workplace equality laws and political representation. Social feminism resonates with those pushing for intersectional justice and economic reform. Polls show increasing support for feminist ideals, especially among younger generations, but confusion about what feminism actually means is still rampant. That's where you come in, curious viewer. Phew. That got a little intense. Hey. But hey, society doesn't evolve through Netflix binges alone, sadly. Remember, these movements, though sometimes labeled moderate, have brought us things like the right to vote, work, control over our bodies, and be treated like full humans. Not bad. Next time on IdeaSpectrum, we're staying hot. We'll explore how clothing choices and fashion norms reflect deeper social tensions and ideologies, and how they can be used to express ideas. Yes, your jeans might be political. If that sounds spicy, Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss your next dose of IdeaSpectrum awesomeness. Until next time, question harder, think broader, and don't let anyone shrink your spectrum.